tonight we're setting foot on cobblestones slipperier than a politician's promises, because we're going shopping in the Middle Ages. Not the online kind, not the scan your groceries and escape before making eye contact kind, but the real, actual medieval shopping experience. Loud, muddy, and absolutely guaranteed to ruin your mood and your outfit. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what you wish you could buy at a medieval market. Now dim the lights, put on a fan for that low-budget white noise, maybe grab your softest blanket. Get cozy, because you're about to mentally experience a shopping trip where you might be trampled by a goat, get pickpocketed by a child, and still come home with nothing but turnips and a rash. Have you ever wondered, what did people actually buy in the Middle Ages? Did shops have hours? Or was it just a chaotic free-for-all? How did anyone find what they needed before the invention of the shopping cart or, aisles? Could you return rotten eggs, or did you just have to fight the chicken? How did you even pay for stuff, and what did you do when the customer service involved a man with a stick and anger issues? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1352. It's market day. You're broke, confused, and already have mud in places that will haunt you for weeks. Let's go shopping. The sun isn't even up, but the market square is already full of shouting, squawking, and the suspicious splash of something that is definitely not water. You shuffle in with the crowd, hoping nobody notices you still smell faintly of last night's pottage. The air is a thick soup of animal breath, baking bread, and someone's armpit. Welcome to shopping, medieval style. You haven't had breakfast yet, and already your shoes, if you're lucky enough to own any, are filled with mud, straw, and maybe something you don't want to identify. The cobblestones are more of a suggestion than a fact, slippery with centuries of spilled ale and the odd chicken disaster. Somewhere in the distance a goat screams, because this is the Middle Ages and someone is always screaming. Sometimes it's you. As you pass through the crowd, you try to keep your head down. There are no shopping carts, no polite lines, no soothing background music, just the roar of commerce, and a small army of geese who seem to run this place like a feathery gang. If you so much as look at one of them wrong, you're likely to be chased halfway to the blacksmith's stall. You step aside for a donkey with a mysterious agenda and sidestep a boy selling onions who already looks like he could out-haggle a modern hedge fund manager. The market is not so much a place as an ongoing test of your survival skills. Everyone is talking at once, in at least 3 different dialects, and most of them are trying to sell you something you definitely don't need. Like a second-hand comb or miracle ointment made from ingredients that would terrify your local pharmacist. Every transaction is an act of theatre. The stallholders shout their prices with the urgency of people auctioning off the last loaf before winter, and the buyers respond with groans, laughter, or occasionally a well-placed insult. You can barely hear yourself think over the din. Chickens flapping, vendors bartering, the clang of the blacksmith working on something metallic and vaguely threatening. A distant bell rings, but it's unclear if it means mass is starting or someone's pig just got loose again. Nobody seems alarmed, so you carry on, clutching your worn coin pouch as if it might sprout legs and make a run for it. That actually happens here. Last week old Elfrida lost her purse to a squirrel. Nobody was surprised. You squeeze through a knot of villagers haggling over the price of turnips and try not to breathe too deeply. Every step is a negotiation with fate. Dodge the puddle, avoid the pickpocket, don't make eye contact with the eel salesman. He has ambitions and 0 sense of personal space. The crowd ebbs and flows like a tide, sometimes sweeping you toward a stall selling suspiciously green cheese, sometimes spinning you around until you're nose to nose with someone's elderly grandmother who's surprisingly strong and extremely committed to getting the best deal on cabbages. And then there's the livestock section. Imagine a petting zoo, but with much less supervision and way more attitude. Sheep bar in protest, pigs root under the stalls, and a single enormous cow blocks your path with the immovable authority of a traffic cone made out of steak. You attempt a detour and wind up nearly tripping over a dog that may or may not have a job as the town's unofficial tax collector. The smells, the sights, the constant threat of accidental poultry theft. It all blends together in a way that's equal parts exhilarating and exhausting. You find yourself clutching your list, mentally because paper is for rich people, wondering how you'll ever make it home with your dignity, your money and your shoes intact. This is market day. You're not here for fun, you're here for survival, for a crust of bread and maybe a new onion. As you take it all in, one thing becomes clear. You may have woken up in medieval times, but it'll be a miracle if you make it out of this market with your sanity, or your socks. Welcome to shopping, medieval style. If you're not already tired, just wait until you try to leave. Before you buy anything, you need to blend in. That means one outfit, 3 layers of dirt, and a cloak that looks like it lost a fight with a sheep. Everyone's wearing some version of brown. The fashion police are replaced by actual police, and they care more about your taxes than your hemline. You glance around the market square and realise medieval style isn't about self-expression, unless you count expressing a lifelong struggle with laundry. Nobody's here to make a statement unless the statement is, please. Nobody notice how many days I've worn this tunic. Clothing isn't an accessory, it's armour against mud, weather and deeply personal smells. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between a wealthy merchant and a passing turnip farmer until one tries to sell you a bucket of eels. Let's take inventory. You're wearing a linen shirt. Well, what started as linen. After 3 years of sweat, cooking smoke, and farm accidents, it's now a beige to grey shade best described as historically accurate. Over that, a woolen tunic, patched so many times it looks like a group project for blind squirrels. If you're lucky, there's a second tunic on top. Layering in the Middle Ages isn't just a fashion tip. It's the only way to stop the wind from discovering new shortcuts to your bare skin. No one talks about seasonal colour palettes here. You wear brown in winter, brown in spring, and a kind of greenish-brown in summer when the mould starts winning. Your trousers sag at the knees because elastic hasn't been invented, and neither has hope. If you're particularly stylish, maybe you have a belt, basically a rope, which you use to hold up your dignity and whatever else is threatening to escape. Socks are optional, shoes are wishful thinking, and gloves are just old rags tied around your hands. If you see someone in actual leather boots, congratulations, you're in the presence of local royalty. Everyone else walks around with feet wrapped in whatever fabric was left over after mending the donkey's saddle. Let's talk about cloaks. Medieval cloaks are the Swiss Army knives of outerwear. They double as blankets, raincoats, and if you're really down on your luck, a picnic blanket for lunch and a mattress at night. Your cloak is never the right length, always slightly damp, and carries the faint aroma of every animal you've ever owned, plus a few you haven't. Occasionally a mouse takes up residence in the folds, and honestly, who can blame it? Accessories. Medieval people have a few. Patches, for example, are always in fashion because every piece of clothing is at least 30% patch by surface area. Headwear varies. A floppy wool cap for the optimist, a hood for the sneaky, and a square of cloth for anyone who gave up on appearances around the time their first tooth fell out. Scarves are popular, mostly because they hide mysterious neck stains and, in a pinch, can be used as an emergency bandage or a napkin at lunch. Jewellery? Forget about it. The only thing hanging around your neck is last week's soup stain. If you see someone with a shiny brooch or an actual ring, it probably means they're either a visiting noble or a very optimistic thief. Laundry day is a biannual event, if that. Washing your clothes means hauling them to a stream, breaking the ice with a rock and hoping nobody upstream just dumped their chamber pot. And anyway, everyone agrees. The dirt helps insulate you against the wind. It's less laundry and more environmental protection. You don't get dirty, you accumulate status. The more mysterious the stain, the more people nod with respect. Nobody wants to know what that is, but it must mean you're seasoned. So you adjust your belt, scratch something that's definitely not going away, and join the swirling crowd of brown on brown. Nobody notices your outfit because honestly theirs is just as tragic. As far as the medieval market is concerned, you fit right in. And in a place where personal hygiene is a community project, that's the highest compliment you'll get. Congratulations, you're officially dressed for success, or at least for survival. There's no mistaking the fish stall. You smell it before you see it. Piles of questionable cod glisten in the sun, attracting cats, flies and people with no sense of self-preservation. Haggling is encouraged, but so is not breathing through your nose. You shuffle closer, doing your best impression of someone who can't actually smell anything. The fishmonger, a man with forearms like tree trunks and a voice loud enough to scare small birds out of the rafters, is already in full sales mode. Fresh from the river this morning, he booms, slapping a pike that looks like it may have seen the river last week. If you're lucky, he's only exaggerating by a day or two. If you're unlucky, that's not even a pike. It's just the world's least convincing eel in a cod costume. Your eyes start to water as you approach the stall. This isn't just a fish market, it's a sensory assault. The cats here look more like miniature tigers, all muscle and ambition, weaving between your legs and eyeing both the fish and your ankles with equal hunger. The flies are winning a silent war against the fishmonger's half-hearted swatting. And you're here to try your hand at negotiation, which is less gentlemanly bartering and more public argument with bonus audience participation. You point at something that might be a herring. The fishmonger launches into a dramatic explanation of its virtues. Never been so fresh. Just caught. Look at those eyes. You look, and the eyes look back, each pointing in a different direction, as if the fish itself is deeply concerned about your life choices. A bystander chimes in. My cousin ate one of those and was fine, after a week. Comforting. You're not just shopping for dinner, you're shopping for a miracle. The concept of refrigeration doesn't exist, so every fish here is racing the sun to see which will go off first. There's a special kind of optimism required to buy fish in the Middle Ages. You want something that's not too slimy, not too dry, and, ideally, doesn't audibly groan when moved. That's a rare combination. Meanwhile, haggling is less about the price and more about establishing dominance. The fishmonger throws out a price that could feed a family for a week. You counter with an offer so low it would offend a rock. The back and forth is fierce, theatrical, and observed by half the market. Someone starts placing side bets. Eventually you agree to a price somewhere between robbery and acceptable loss. The fishmonger throws in a bonus fish head for stew, he claims. You know it's because nobody else will take it. The shopping experience is made richer by the ambient soundtrack, the steady slap of fins, the occasional thud of a carp escaping its bucket, and the wild laughter of children poking at jellyfish with sticks. Every now and then, a cat scores a victory and vanishes into the crowd, trailing a string of fish guts and the admiration of everyone except the fishmonger. If you're especially unlucky, the wind shifts and you get a full blast of market aroma, a heady blend of drying fish, old river mud, and dreams deferred. It clings to your clothes like a curse. For the rest of the day, people will know exactly which stall you visited, and your family will welcome you home with the medieval equivalent of Fabrizi, opening every window and making you sleep in the barn. Finally, with your prize in hand, a moderately suspicious perch wrapped in yesterday's cabbage leaf, you step away victorious. You survived the fishmonger's stall, out-haggled the man with the club, dodged the cats, and managed not to faint. Sure, your dinner may glow in the dark, but in the Middle Ages that's just bonus seasoning. Congratulations, you're now a true medieval shopper, and if you don't wake up with a stomachache tomorrow, you might just try your luck again next week. Bread is the backbone of your diet, and possibly your dental problems. The local baker slaps down a loaf that's harder than your neighbour's head. You eye it, wondering if it's for eating or self-defence. Spoiler, it's both. You step up to the baker's stall, greeted by a row of bread loaves lined up like a medieval wall of shame. There's no such thing as freshly baked here, unless you count bread that is only slightly softer than the table it sits on. The baker, hands dusted with flour and arms like rolling pins, gives you a nod and gestures to his wares, round loaves, flat loaves, long loaves, all roughly the colour of sadness and the consistency of a small boulder. He tells you they're today's batch. Today is a flexible term in the Middle Ages. It could mean today, yesterday, or any day this week that was not already claimed by the cheese seller. You pick up a loaf and knock on it experimentally. It sounds like knocking on your front door after curfew. The baker raises an eyebrow, unimpressed. Around you, other shoppers test the bread the same way, as if everyone's searching for that mythical soft spot, the sweet spot between edible and emergency masonry. You'd think, with all the time people spend baking, the result would be soft, fluffy and inviting. Not so. The average peasant loaf is a masterclass in disappointment. It's made of whatever grain the harvest didn't ruin, barley, rye, oats, or on lucky days wheat, which is so expensive it's basically medieval gold. To stretch out the flour, bakers mix in everything from ground beans to leftover peas, or during truly dark times, sawdust and old acorn shells. Sometimes you find a loaf so dense it could serve as the foundation for your next house. Crusts are thick enough to defeat most knives. In fact, the family bread knife is probably the sharpest object in the house out of necessity. Some loaves are so tough that eating them is less about nourishment and more about dental endurance. You don't slice bread here. You wrestle it into submission, gnawing around the edges until it gives up or your jaw cramps. But there's a strange comfort in the ritual. Bread is the one thing you're guaranteed to eat every day, even if it's mostly out of self-defense against starvation. In the Middle Ages, people judge each other not by fashion or wit, but by how few teeth they've lost to the daily loaf. Families swap stories of bread-related injuries. The baker's stall has seen more chipped teeth than the local blacksmith. There's a saying among peasants, "May your loaf be just soft enough to bite and just hard enough to throw." Bread isn't just food, it's a tool. You can use it to prop open doors, keep your window from rattling, or, in a true emergency, as a makeshift weapon. A well-aimed stale roll can settle disputes faster than the village priest. When you finally decide on a loaf, you hand over your coins or maybe barter with an onion, depending on how fancy you're feeling. The baker wraps your purchase in a scrap of linen, which you will reuse until it becomes a family heirloom. You tuck your bread under your arm like a prized possession. If you're wise, you'll soak it in stew tonight, because soak and chew is the medieval answer to "I'd like to keep my teeth." As you walk away from the stall, bread in hand, you look around at the other shoppers, each cradling their own personal brick of sadness. Tomorrow you'll do it again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find a loaf with a hint of softness, something to dream about as you drift off to sleep, jaw aching, stomach rumbling, proud owner of the Middle Ages' most versatile object. Sweet dreams, medieval bread warrior. Forget dressing rooms. You hold a wool tunic up to your body and pray it covers the essential bits. Everything is one size fits nobody, and fashion means didn't come pre-stained. You settle for something that's less itchy than the last one, but only barely. Welcome to the medieval clothing market, where the concept of trying before buying is replaced by try not to itch to death. There's no soft ambient lighting, no pop music, and definitely no full-length mirror. Just a battered wooden stall, a heap of misshapen tunics, and the ever-present aroma of sheep. If you're lucky, the merchant might shake out the worst of the hay and bugs before offering it to you. If not, consider it bonus insulation. The merchant, a woman with arms like bread loaves and the suspicious look of someone who's seen it all, watches you manhandle a pile of tunics. "That one's a good one," she says, pointing to a tunic that looks like it moonlights as a burlap sack. Only 3 moth holes and the bloodstain's almost gone. She's not wrong. Everything here comes pre-distressed, usually with a patchwork of repairs and mysterious stains that probably tell stories better left untold. Every piece of clothing is a relic of survival. You'll find tunics patched with scraps of other tunics, leggings that look more like a quilt project gone rogue, and the occasional cloak that's still faintly damp from last winter. In the Middle Ages, clothes are worn, repaired, handed down, patched, and sometimes boiled for good measure. The more holes you patch, the longer you can put off the horror of shopping for new fabric. Because cloth is expensive and nobody's wallet is thick enough for style. You eye the pile of new shirts, which are really just old shirts with fewer stains. The material is always wool or linen, and both are a gamble. Linen is cool in summer, but stains if you even think about rain. Wool keeps you warm, but also makes you itch in places you didn't know existed. If you want colours, prepare to be disappointed. The spectrum here is brown. Brown with a hint of green. And maybe this used to be blue. Trying things on is a public affair. There's no privacy, just a loose ring of market gawkers and the merchant's dog, who judges your fashion sense with every whine. If you're especially unlucky, the sleeves reach your elbows and the hem stops at your knees, leaving your ankles to the mercy of the elements and the local gossip mill. Medieval clothing sizing works on the principle of just tuck it somewhere. If a tunic's too long, you belt it. If it's too short, you layer. If it's too tight, congratulations, it's now your new sleeping tunic. Underwear? You're dreaming. Most people go without or settle for a linen shift if they're feeling fancy. Socks, if you're lucky enough to have them, are wool tubes that double as oven mitts and emergency handkerchiefs. Shoes? Maybe if you didn't spend all your money on that slightly less itchy tunic. Shopping for accessories means bargaining for a hat that's more rag than fashion, or a scarf that can serve as a belt, sling or window curtain in a pinch. Buttons are rare, laces are usually bits of string, and anything with actual embroidery is either stolen or was made by someone who loved you once, many years ago. As you hand over your coin, or barter away your last onion, the merchant beams. That'll last you through winter, or until you outgrow it, whichever comes first. You try to smile, but your new tunic is already itching through 3 layers of skin. You adjust your rope belt and stride away, a little more medieval than you were before. At least you fit in with the crowd. Everyone's scratching, everyone's patched, and nobody's outfit matches. In medieval fashion, survival is always in style, and if you're not comfortable, at least you're period accurate. The produce stall offers turnips, and more turnips. Occasionally there's a sad apple with one bite already missing. You buy whatever isn't moving and hope it's edible. Vitamin C is a distant dream. You approach the produce stand, dodging a chicken and stepping over a puddle that may or may not be organic. The stall holder, an elderly woman with hands like tree roots and a glare that could curdle milk, gestures grandly to her wares. All fresh, she declares, though you suspect fresh in medieval terms just means not actively decomposing. Turnips reign supreme, lumpy and slightly menacing, stacked into mounds that double as fortifications. If you're lucky, you might find a parsnip or two, each one with the shape and texture of a wizard's finger. Cabbages lurk at the back of the stall, outer leaves torn and browning, their insides promising only more layers of disappointment. Sometimes there are carrots, but they're stunted and vaguely orange, resembling something you'd find in the wild and immediately regret touching. For fruit, the selection is even bleaker. There's a single pear, already halfway to vinegar, and next to it, an apple with the telltale crescent of someone else's teeth. You eye a basket of berries, but the berries eye you back, somehow fuzzier than you remember from last season. The vendor shrugs. Still good for a pie, she says, which is code for add enough honey and nobody will notice. Shopping for produce is not about choice. It's about compromise and a little bit of risk assessment. The Middle Ages aren't exactly known for their agricultural diversity. If it's winter, forget about anything green. Your diet is about to become a turnip-themed endurance challenge. In spring, you might get lucky with some wild greens or the world's most underwhelming lettuce. In summer, beans appear. Tough, stringy, but miraculously not a turnip. Autumn brings apples, but only for a few weeks. And then it's back to the root cellar for another tour of tuber misery. Haggling is less artful negotiation and more desperate plea. You attempt to swap a handful of copper for a sack of not-too-mushy turnips, but the vendor holds firm. Best crop all year, she insists, thumping a root with so much conviction you nearly believe her. In truth, the only thing that changes at the produce stall is the season, and how close the vendor is to running out of patience. You scan for something to brighten your meal, an onion maybe, or the holy grail, garlic. Garlic is precious, hoarded for special occasions and for pretending your stew has flavour. Every now and then, someone brings exotic produce from a faraway town, a wilted leek, a knobbly radish, or once a tomato that caused so much confusion it was declared both poisonous and foreign. Most villagers still don't trust anything red that isn't a beet. The concept of a salad is laughable. Your idea of variety is mixing two kinds of root vegetable in the same pot and pretending you're feasting. Scurvy is an ever-present spectre, stalking anyone who gets too creative with their meal planning. Vitamin C is something only saints and sailors dream about. If you do find a lemon, it's probably been traded so many times it's now worth more than your shoes. You finally make your selection. A handful of turnips, one battered cabbage, and for the splurge, a pear that you will almost certainly regret. The vendor wraps them in a scrap of old cloth, and you shuffle off, knowing tonight's dinner will be more about texture than taste. At least you survive the produce stall. You tuck your bounty under your arm and join the river of equally disappointed shoppers. Everyone is leaving with something pale, lumpy, and suspiciously damp. In the world of medieval vegetables, hope springs eternal, and then is boiled for 3 hours just to be safe. Shopping for meat is an adventure and a trust exercise. The butcher waves a cleaver, grins with too many teeth, and presents cuts you can't identify. You nod and hope you're not buying someone's lost pet. The butcher's stall is the rowdiest corner of the market. Part theatre, part lottery, all potential regret. You approach with cautious optimism, trying not to make eye contact with any of the various animal heads staring blankly from the display. Chickens, rabbits, and the occasional sheep are suspended from hooks like grisly Christmas ornaments, while slabs of meat of uncertain origin rest on a stained wooden counter that's seen more blood than the local battlefield. Everything here is raw and unapologetic. There's no refrigeration, no glass display case, just open air, buzzing flies, and a hope that winter will keep things fresh for another few hours. The aroma is layered. There's the heavy tang of blood, the sweet rot of offal, and a faint hint of wood smoke, possibly to disguise the scent of something past its prime. A stray dog waits under the table, eyeing every scrap as if it's auditioning for the part of your shadow. You scan the options, playing a medieval guessing game. That might be pork, or it might be something more adventurous. The butcher insists it's perfect for stew, which, in medieval code, means don't ask too many questions. A row of sausages dangles overhead, some stuffed so full you're sure they contain hopes, dreams, and a few things not strictly legal. There's a heart, some kidneys, and what you strongly suspect is a pile of mystery organs. There's no such thing as prime cuts here. The best parts go to the nobility or the very rich, leaving you with what's left. Bones, scraps, and whatever the butcher can sweep off the table before the local cat helps itself. Every part of the animal is used. Head, feet, tail, and everything in between. Nose-to-tail eating isn't a trend here. It's survival. If you're squeamish, your choices are limited to grin and bear it, or go hungry. Haggling is expected, but the butcher is an expert at spinning a tale. This joint right here, best in the village. My own mother eats it. You look sceptical. He leans in, dropping his voice. Don't worry about the colour, that's just heritage. You give up and ask for a shank. He hacks off a chunk, wraps it in yesterday's news, or the medieval equivalent, a leaf or scrap of cloth, and hands it over with a flourish. Paying is another experience. You count out your coins or barter with an onion, and a promise to tell everyone the butcher's sausages are only mildly alarming. If you're lucky, you get a bone thrown in for the soup pot, which is code for here's something to gnaw on while you question your choices. The butcher's grin never wavers. It's possible he's never blinked. As you leave the stall, you notice other shoppers casting furtive glances at their purchases, silently playing "What animal am I eating tonight?" There are whispered legends about someone who once bought beef that turned out to be something no one could identify even after hours of boiling. But you take comfort in knowing that, if nothing else, your dinner will be protein. Possibly adventurous, definitely chewy, and probably safer if it's been cooked for 3 hours. At home, your family will dissect the package with the intensity of medieval surgeons, sniffing, poking, and inventing names for whatever turns up. It's a bonding experience. Nothing says love like collectively pretending that's definitely lamb. Or maybe rabbit. Or possibly, just eat it and don't ask. One thing is certain. In the Middle Ages, shopping for meat isn't about luxury. It's about creativity, courage, and the stubborn hope that whatever's in your stew tonight, it won't bite back. There's cheese for sale, but it's not exactly aged. More like sentient. You take a sniff and realise your sinuses will never recover. Still, it's the closest thing to flavour you'll taste all week. The cheese stall sits proudly in the middle of the market, a small mountain of rounds, wedges, and unidentifiable blobs stacked for all to admire or fear. The vendor, a person who has clearly spent their life surrounded by dairy fumes, beams at you with the pride of someone who truly believes in their product, no matter how many people faint after a single whiff. The cheese selection covers every shade from pale cream to a greenish blue that glows faintly in direct sunlight. There's hard cheese, soft cheese, and one particularly alarming cheese sweating quietly in a basket, threatening to slide away if not closely monitored. You approach cautiously, doing your best to breathe through your mouth. Buying cheese in the Middle Ages is part culinary adventure, part survival challenge. The cheeses here have character and possibly civil rights. Some are so pungent they could double as insect repellent. You pick up a hunk of something labelled Farmer's Pride. It's got the consistency of a brick and the scent of deep philosophical regret. The vendor offers you a sample, slicing off a bit with a knife that might have last seen soap during the reign of the previous king. Try it, they urge, as if you might suddenly remember that your favourite childhood memory is eating glue. The sample hits your tongue like a medieval curse, salty, tangy, and with a hint of something you hope is just herbal. Your eyes water, your toes curl, and you nod politely, because this is your best shot at flavour all week. Medieval cheese is less a food and more a test of local immune systems. There's no pasteurisation, no standardised recipe, just milk, rennet, whatever wild bacteria happened to land in the vat that morning, and time. Lots of time. Sometimes the cheese is hard enough to survive a siege. Other times it's runny and determined to escape its own rind. You select a wedge that seems stable, prodding it gently. If it wobbles, you move on. Prices depend on age, smell, and how much nerve you have. The really aromatic stuff is often the cheapest. It's mature, the vendor assures you, the best taste, which is medieval code for no one else will buy this and I can't stand to throw it away. There's a rumour in town that eating certain cheeses grants special powers, like the power to see through walls or repel your in-laws at family gatherings. More likely, it just means you'll be very unpopular in close quarters. Cheese in the Middle Ages is more than just a side dish. It's protein, calories, and sometimes the main event when the stew is thin and the bread's more weapon than nourishment. In bad years, a good cheese can be the difference between survival and another night of unsalted turnip soup. But you have to be careful. Not all cheese is friendly. Some is streaked with mysterious colours, some is fuzzy, and a few actively resist being sliced. You once heard of a traveller who bought a wheel of cheese so stubborn it dulled his knife and his spirit. Once you've chosen your cheese, usually the one that seems least aggressive, you hand over your coins and tuck it safely into your basket. On the way home, you contemplate whether to eat it, trade it for favours, or use it to fumigate the pantry. At dinner, your family gathers round, hopeful and wary, as you reveal the prize. Even if the taste is distinctive, nobody complains. In a world where food is often bland or outright dangerous, a bite of cheese, no matter how adventurous, feels like luxury. So you chew thoughtfully, eyes watering, and remind yourself, in the Middle Ages, a cheese that bites back is still better than a turnip that just sits there. Eggs come unwashed and slightly warm. Chickens are sold live, squawking and judging you. You attempt to buy half a dozen eggs, but end up in a bidding war for a chicken that escapes anyway. Medieval shopping, 1, you, 0. The poultry stall is a scene of organised chaos, a symphony of clucks, feathers, and the occasional shout as a rooster attempts to assert dominance over both humans and fellow birds. The air is thick with straw, feathers, and the sort of farmyard perfume that would have modern city dwellers reaching for industrial-strength hand sanitizer. You try to look like someone who's done this before. You fail immediately, which the stall holder, an old woman with a chicken permanently glued to her shoulder, spots from a mile away. Eggs are sold in small piles on the table, nestled in hay. No cartons, no uniformity, and definitely no best before dates. You pick one up, wipe off a suspicious smudge, and try not to imagine where it's been. Some eggs are comically tiny, others seem big enough to have their own mortgage. You politely ask for 6, but the vendor insists on giving you the good ones, which she sorts with all the ceremony of a high priest choosing sacrifices. Each egg is inspected, tapped, and then handed over with a solemn nod, as if it contains not a future omelette but the fate of the village. Chickens, meanwhile, are sold with all the pageantry of a livestock pageant gone wrong. You eye a particularly sturdy-looking hen. She eyes you back, sizing up your weaknesses. A small crowd gathers, because in the Middle Ages shopping is a team sport. Someone behind you shouts a bid, and suddenly it's less a sale and more an auction, with participants ranging from the local tanner to a small child wielding what may or may not be a real coin. The bidding heats up, fueled by nothing but pride and the universal belief that the loudest person must win. The chicken takes this as her cue to make a break for it. Feathers fly, people shout, and for a brief, glorious moment you're part of a medieval relay race. Except your baton is a live bird, and she's not on your team. The stallholder curses, the crowd laughs, and the chicken disappears into the market, probably to start a new life as the mayor of the livestock section. Meanwhile, the eggs you painstakingly selected are in danger. Someone else tries to trade you a duckling for 2 eggs and half a turnip, which, even by medieval standards, feels like a bad deal. You clutch your eggs, trying not to look like someone who's lost control of the poultry situation. You have. The vendor, sensing defeat, offers you a replacement, a lovely rooster with a personality disorder and a criminal record among local cats. Eventually you pay for your eggs, receive a burlap sack to carry them home, as if burlap and eggs are natural friends, and accept your fate. As for the chicken, she's gone, vanished into legend. The tanner claims he once saw her at the fishmonger's, bartering for eels. You choose to believe him because, honestly, anything feels possible after today. As you walk away, eggs rattling gently, you pass other shoppers, some cradling proud purchases, others sporting new scratches and defeated expressions. The poultry section is above all humbling. You didn't win the chicken, but you didn't lose all your eggs, and in the world of medieval shopping that counts as a victory. Tonight, if you're lucky, you'll eat eggs. If you're luckier, you'll eat in peace, without the echoing judgment of a chicken who once looked into your soul and found you lacking. Either way, you survived, and that's the best you can hope for in the feather-fraught, egg-splattered battlefield of the medieval market. Coins are rare. Most people barter, trade a sack of beans for a length of rope, a bucket of milk for someone's dignity. If you have actual money, congratulations. Now, try not to lose it in a puddle or to a nimble-fingered pickpocket. Navigating the medieval market's economy is like playing a board game where nobody agrees on the rules. The board is covered in mud, and one of the pieces is a live chicken. You clutch your purse, containing a few battered coins, a piece of string, and a button you swear was silver once, close to your chest. Every transaction here is an exercise in creative negotiation and deep personal trust issues. Barter is king. Cash is suspicious. If you walk up flashing coins, everyone assumes you're either a noble, a thief, or suffering from a recent head injury. The local blacksmith eyeing your shiny silver penny will insist that a horseshoe now costs 3 times what it did yesterday. The baker prefers onions, the seamstress wants firewood, the fishmonger apparently only accepts turnips, which is bad news if you're already maxed out on root vegetables. Let's say you want a loaf of bread. You offer the baker a length of homemade rope and a kind word about his hat. He laughs, shakes his head, and counters with a trade. 1 loaf for 2 candles, a thimble, and the promise to never bring up his hat again. Negotiations can last longer than the bread itself. Sometimes the solution is to involve a third party. Maybe old Tom, who has candles but needs eggs, and whose neighbour in turn is desperate for rope. Before you know it, you're brokering a miniature barter chain that ends with you clutching a loaf and wondering why you're now the proud owner of 3 cabbages and a slightly damp shoe. Coins, if you're lucky enough to use them, come in all shapes and sizes. Some are round, some are square, and a few are so worn down you could use them as a mirror in low light. If you hand someone a coin from a distant region, expect a raised eyebrow and a detailed discussion about the king's face on the front. Is this a real Edward or a fake Henry? It looks like someone carved it with a carrot. Merchants test coins by biting them or dropping them on the stool, listening for that magical not fake ring. Change is never simple. Don't expect a handful of shiny pennies and a polite thank you. More likely you'll get a handful of mystery coins, a piece of string, or the market classic. I owe you 1 goat, redeemable whenever I can catch it. And good luck cashing in on that. More than one shopper has found themselves chasing livestock through muddy lanes, mentally recalculating the value of their purchase as a chicken escapes into the wild. Of course, none of this stops the pickpockets, who treat the market as their personal training ground. The truly skilled ones can spot a coin pouch from 50 paces and relieve you of it while you're busy arguing over the finer points of candle wax. By midday, the local beggar could have more spending power than the local lord, just by running an efficient operation. There's an elegance to all this chaos. The market runs on trust, relationships, and a shared understanding that nobody's really getting a fair deal, but everyone's pretending. Old debts are remembered, favours traded, grudges nursed for generations. If you pay with a coin, people remember. If you pay with a favour, they remember longer. You leave the market a little lighter, maybe missing a coin, a turnip, or a piece of dignity. But you've survived medieval commerce. In a world without credit cards, receipts, or buyer protection, that's no small feat. And if you do find yourself chasing a goat down the lane to balance a debt, well, at least you're getting some fresh air. Welcome to the wild world of medieval shopping. Every market has its local pests, and they don't all have fur. Children and nimble adults weave through the crowds, accidentally bumping into your coin pouch. You spend half your time shopping, the other half checking your pockets. Medieval markets are a masterclass in distraction. Everywhere you look, someone is shouting about their freshest fish or miracle root, while a juggler tosses turnips in the background, and a lute player sings a song that may or may not be about you losing your shoes. In all this noise and chaos, it's easy to forget that behind every smiling face and innocent little nudge, there's a potential heist in the making. Pickpockets in the Middle Ages start young. Forget the idea of childhood innocence. Here, kids are tiny entrepreneurs with a sixth sense for jingling coins and distracted shoppers. They've got nimble fingers, fast feet, and a code of silence stronger than any noble's vow. If you see a cluster of children playing nearby, beware. Half of them are already plotting your financial undoing, and the other half are lookouts. The most skilled pickpockets aren't just sneaky, they're creative. There's the classic trip and grab, where a child stumbles in front of you, apologises profusely, and in the confusion, your purse is suddenly lighter. Or the infamous chicken distraction, where a rogue bird is released into the crowd just as you're counting change, and somehow both the chicken and your coins disappear at the same time. It's a talent that would land them in the best universities, if only universities accepted students with degrees in purse lifting. Adults aren't above a little market larceny either. The local con artist, usually a man with an overly large hat and an even larger smile. offers you an amazing deal on genuine relics, or rare herbs. If you're gullible enough to buy, congratulations. You now own a bone from St. Marmaduke the Slightly Notorious, who, suspiciously, lived in the next village over and was mostly known for losing bar bets. While you try to haggle with the blacksmith, you notice a suspicious tug on your sleeve. You spin around just in time to see a flash of rags and a trail of giggles disappear into the sea of shoppers. Your coin pouch remains, miraculously attached, but it feels slightly emptier, as if the coins themselves have developed cold feet and made a run for it. Some scams are even more elaborate. Fake vendors set up makeshift stalls, loudly advertising cured meats that are just yesterday's turnip stew left out in the sun. There's a woman with a suspiciously large basket who'll sell you healing ointment, which turns out to be a suspiciously fragrant blend of lard and local moss. Buyers beware. Anything that claims to cure both boils and heartbreak probably just makes your skin slippery enough that no one can grab you for a refund. The market's real economy isn't run on coins or barter. It's run on attention. You have to watch everything. Your money, your lunch, your new shoes, and sometimes your dignity. There's no bank to cancel your stolen card, no customer service to issue a new one. You're your own security team, and if you're smart, you develop the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's seen too many small hands disappear into too many pockets. Leaving the market, you check your pouches one last time, mentally accounting for every coin, turnip, and scrap of dignity you entered with. Maybe you're down a few pennies, or maybe you're just a little more wary than before. Either way, you survive the pickpockets and scam artists today, and tomorrow those child prodigies will be back, armed with new tricks, sharper elbows, and a chicken or two for backup. Sleep well, because market day comes again soon, and in medieval times, nobody is above a little light larceny. There are no receipts. If you're unhappy with your purchase, your only recourse is public shaming, a duel, or a strongly worded curse. Buyer's remorse is an actual medical condition. Let's say you get home, unwrap your hard-won loaf of bread, and discover it's more fossil than food. Or maybe that suspicious wedge of cheese you bought is now crawling away on its own, seeking legal emancipation. In a world without 30-day returns or customer satisfaction guarantees, your medieval options are as limited as your diet. The modern ritual of just taking it back to the store and speaking with a manager, forget it. The only manager you'll meet here is the stallholder, who's also the owner, the baker, and if pushed, the local gossip columnist. Returning an item to them is less a transaction and more a full-blown social event. You don't get to stand quietly in a line and wait your turn. No, you march right back to the same market stall, your defective purchase held high for all to see, and prepare for an audience that will absolutely take sides. The first step is making your case. Loudly. The goal isn't to get your money back, good luck with that, but to win over the ever-present jury of your fellow shoppers. Medieval markets run on reputation, not refunds. If you complain about a wormy apple or a fresh fish that's developed a sense of self, you need to be convincing. Bonus points if you can rhyme or invoke a saint. Expect bystanders to heckle, offer advice, and recall every bad apple or mouldy cheese they've ever seen, going back to the great turnip incident of 41. The vendor, meanwhile, is not about to admit wrongdoing. Their livelihood depends on everyone believing their produce is the best in town, even if the turnips double as building material. They'll defend their reputation with the ferocity of a cornered badger, swearing that you mishandled the bread or that cheese is supposed to be adventurous. You might be offered a replacement, a slightly less suspicious apple, or, if you're very lucky, a public apology muttered under their breath. If diplomacy fails, things escalate. Maybe you raise your voice, which invites a chorus of support from sympathetic shoppers and deeply personal insults from those who side with the vendor. At this point, you're not just returning goods, you're auditioning for a medieval courtroom drama. Insults are exchanged, allegiances formed, and old grudges dragged up from the mud like last winter's lost boot. A occasionally, someone's uncle challenges someone's cousin to a duel behind the bakery. If your negotiation skills are lacking, there's always the nuclear option, the curse. Medieval curses are less about actual magic and more about the fine art of creative shaming. You wish upon the vendor a lifetime of stubbed toes, eternally flat beer, or a goat that refuses to be milked. If you're famous for your curses, the market falls silent as you recite your hex. If not, everyone just goes back to arguing about carrots. In the rare event you get a refund, it's not coins, it's barter. You'll receive a replacement loaf, a handful of turnip tops, or a promise that next time you'll get the good stuff. Sometimes you're offered store credit, which means you're doomed to repeat the experience until the cycle of regret becomes tradition. And heaven help you if your complaint is remembered. Feuds in medieval towns are legendary, often starting with a rotten egg and ending 3 generations later, when someone's great-grandson finally forgives the insult to his family's cabbage patch. Market day is less a shopping trip and more a series of tiny polite vendettas with snacks. So if you ever find yourself longing for the refund counter at your local supermarket, remember this. In the Middle Ages, a simple return could rewrite the family history books. Buyer beware. Sometimes it's easier to just eat the mouldy cheese and call it extra flavour. The spice stall is a glittering paradise, if you're wealthy. Pepper is worth its weight in gold. Saffron? Forget it. You settle for a single onion and pretend it's exotic. Salt is both a seasoning and a status symbol. Spices in the medieval marketplace are less about flavour and more about flexing your financial muscle. The stall itself is an aromatic oasis wedged between a fishmonger and the candle seller. Dried herbs hang in dusty bunches, strings of garlic dangle like medieval bling, and behind the stall sits a merchant whose only job is to look smug and occasionally nod at the wealthy patrons. The air here is thick with scents you can barely identify, each one more mysterious and enticing than the last, if you can get past the smell of the fish 2 stalls over. You approach with hope in your heart and a handful of coins jangling in your pocket. The merchant greets you with a knowing smile that says, "Welcome, peasant. Prepare to be disappointed." You ask about pepper, just to see what it feels like to be a dreamer. The merchant produces a tiny wooden box, opens it with the flair of a magician, and reveals maybe 10 peppercorns. You could count them on one hand. He quotes a price so high you start mentally calculating which of your relatives you'd be willing to sell for a single shake of seasoning. Saffron, meanwhile, is locked away with the same security you'd expect for crown jewels or the town's only spoon. It's shown only to those with actual gold, or, more likely, the noblewoman who spends half her day reminding people how special she is. The merchant whispers tales of cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger, but these might as well be spells from a book of fairy tales. For everyone else, spice shopping means choosing between a tired leek and an onion with ambitions. Salt is the closest most people come to luxury. It's sold in gritty lumps, not the pure white powder you might imagine. Sometimes it's pink, sometimes grey, and sometimes it's just questionably edible. Salt is so valuable it's locked up at night, counted at dawn, and occasionally used to pay taxes. Owning salt is a sign you're either prosperous, lucky, or just exceptionally good at hiding your salt from the local tax collector. Still, you browse the rest of the stall, running your hands over bunches of dried rosemary and thyme. These are within reach for most people, but even here the prices are steep. The merchant offers you a deal, a bunch of sage and a wilted onion for the price of a wool sock. You accept, reasoning that aromatic sock is the closest you'll get to a scented sachet in the medieval world. Some shoppers try to get creative. You hear rumours of a neighbour who boiled tree bark and pretended it was cinnamon. Another friend once ground up dried flowers and passed them off as exotic saffron, until someone sneezed uncontrollably at dinner and the ruse was discovered. Medieval culinary innovation, you realise, is mostly about lowering your expectations. You finally settle for an onion, a sprig of something greenish, and the memory of what real flavour might be like. You tuck your treasures into your basket, vowing to stretch them across as many meals as possible. At home, your family will marvel at the onion, passing it around the table like a holy relic, each person taking a small sniff and sighing with appreciation. As you leave, the merchant gives you a wink. He knows you'll be back, because even the hint of spice is enough to make a grey medieval stew taste like hope, and in the end, that's the real magic. For one shining moment, you can pretend your dinner is fit for a king. In the Middle Ages, seasoning your food is both an act of rebellion and a distant dream. Tonight you'll eat turnip soup, but you'll sprinkle it with a pinch of onion and a lot of imagination. Need a new plough? Maybe a horseshoe? The blacksmith's table is an assortment of iron objects, all heavy enough to cause a hernia. Swords are expensive. Most people leave with a nail or a new bucket handle, slightly disappointed. You approach the blacksmith's corner, a smoky, clang-filled oasis in the middle of the market chaos. The air here is different, hot, metallic, and seasoned with the sweat of generations. The blacksmith himself is part man, part soot, muscles like barrels, hands the size of dinner plates, and an expression that says he'd rather be hammering hot iron than dealing with another request for a discount. The stall is a chaotic buffet of medieval hardware. There are ploughs and sickles, axes and adzes, chains in more sizes than you knew existed, and a mountain of nails. Nails, it turns out, are the secret backbone of the entire medieval economy. People whisper about those rare souls who can afford a whole sack of them. Local legends, really, like someone who's actually seen the ocean. You pick one up, testing its weight, and immediately put it back when you realise you'd have to sell your neighbour's goat to pay for a handful. Next up, horseshoes. You didn't know there could be so many kinds, all slightly wrong for your horse's feet. The blacksmith offers expert advice, which mostly involves grunting and pointing, before hammering a shoe into shape with a speed that suggests he's done this about 6 times before breakfast. You nod along, pretending you know what quarter clips are, and agreeing that, yes, the old Roman style really is making a comeback. Somewhere in the pile is the one sword, the centrepiece of every blacksmith's stall, gleaming in the sunlight, attracting the attention of children, would-be knights, and grown men who still dream of adventure. The sword is perfectly balanced, razor-sharp, and outrageously expensive. It's the medieval version of a sports car. Nobody actually needs it. Everyone wants it, and the closest most people get is touching the hilt and sighing dramatically. Every now and then someone asks about it, just to feel brave, but the blacksmith simply raises an eyebrow and mentions the price, which is roughly equivalent to a new roof, 3 cows, and your left leg. So, you move on to more realistic purchases. A new bucket handle, because buckets are held together with prayer and luck, or perhaps a patch for your plough, which is currently more hole than tool. The blacksmith digs round in a box for something just the right size, hands it to you, and adds a handful of extra nails. On the house, if you promise not to ask about the sword again. A small crowd gathers now and then, watching as the blacksmith demonstrates his craft. Metal glowing orange, sparks flying, the rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil almost soothing, like a lullaby, if your lullabies involve the threat of fire. Kids are transfixed while adults do mental math, wondering if today's the day they finally upgrade from bucket with a stick to bucket with a stick and an actual handle. Payment is as creative as always. A few copper coins, a trade for firewood, maybe a promise to fix the blacksmith's fence in spring. He keeps a ledger in his head, and heaven help you if you forget your debts. Blacksmiths have long memories and even longer hammers. You walk away with your new, slightly crooked nail, and the satisfying knowledge that your bucket might last another week. The sword stays behind, waiting for someone braver, richer, or possibly delusional enough to buy it. As you merge back into the crowd, the clang of the anvil follows you, a reminder that in the Middle Ages the blacksmith isn't just a craftsman, he's the unsung hero who keeps the whole creaky world from falling apart. And as for that sword, maybe one day. For now, you'll just settle for not dropping your bucket on your foot. Soap is rare, expensive, and oddly shaped. You debate whether smelling slightly better is worth 3 days' wages. Ultimately, you decide to just embrace your natural scent. So does everyone else. The soap seller's stall is more myth than reality. A small wooden table wedged between the candlemaker and the fishmonger, making it the only thing standing between you and a wave of medieval body odour. On display are a handful of rough, lumpy bars in a suspicious range of colours. They look less like luxury goods and more like the world's least appetising cheese. The merchant guards them with the intensity of a dragon, eyes darting, daring anyone to get too close without serious financial intent. Soap in the Middle Ages is an event. It's not just a cleaning product, it's a statement piece, a status symbol, a conversation starter, and probably an insurance policy. The bars are homemade, crafted from a mysterious recipe involving animal fat, ashes, sometimes herbs, and always a pinch of secrecy. Some boast flecks of lavender or rosemary, for the high rollers, while others are just slightly gritty cubes that look like they'd take the top layer off your skin. You pick up a bar and sniff it cautiously. It smells like honesty, like burnt grass, cooked animal, and a vague hint of hope. You ask the price, and the seller, with a look of great suffering, quotes you a sum high enough to make you reconsider ever making friends again. For the price of one bar, you could buy enough turnips to feed your family for a week, or enough ale to make you forget you need soap at all. There are rumours that the nobility use a different kind of soap, white, perfumed and soft as a cloud. You've never seen it, but you're sure it exists somewhere, probably being guarded by a knight in a scented suit of armour. For everyone else, washing means relying on the once-a-season communal bath, a muddy creek, or just waiting until a hard rain and hoping nobody's watching. Personal hygiene, you realise, is not a medieval priority. The logic is simple. Everyone stinks, so nobody stinks. It's an unspoken community bond, a kind of olfactory detente. There are exceptions. The village priest, the merchant's wife, that one annoyingly clean child who's obviously from out of town. But for the most part, you and your neighbours are united in aromatic solidarity. If you want to blend in, your best bet is to skip the soap, or at least ration it for special occasions like weddings, funerals, and particularly ambitious trips to the city. For the few who do invest in soap, it's kept like treasure. One bar will last months, stored carefully in a wooden box or tucked away in a linen pouch. It's reserved for real emergencies, sudden plagues, royalty passing through, or an unexpected visit from your judgmental in-laws. Most days, a splash of cold water and a good scrub with a handful of moss will have to do. You hand back the soap, trying not to look too heartbroken. The merchant gives you a knowing nod. She's seen your type before. "Come back when you're rich," she says, half joking, half hopeful. As you walk away, the faint, lingering smell of soap clings to your fingers, a fleeting promise of what might have been. Back in the market crowd, the combined aroma of humanity, livestock and adventure swirls around you. Your nose adapts, your standards lower, and soon you barely notice at all. After all, in the Middle Ages, nobody's writing poetry about how fresh you smell, just that you survived another week. So you embrace your natural scent shoulder to shoulder with your equally fragrant neighbours. If everyone smells like turnips and ambition, is anyone truly unclean? At least tonight you'll drift off to sleep with the gentle reassurance that nobody, not even you, can afford to be squeaky clean. There's no bottled water. You wait in line at the communal well, hoping no one ahead drops a chicken in. Water comes with floaties, usually not the fun kind. You fill your jug and hope to live another day. Fetching water in the Middle Ages is less a chore and more a community event, a contest of patience, upper body strength, and immune system fortitude. Before the sun is even fully up, villagers form a slow-moving, shivering queue, each clutching a battered jug, wooden bucket, or, for the truly desperate, whatever container can still hold liquid without leaking. The well sits in the centre of town, a social hub where gossip flows more freely than the water, and everyone watches nervously as old Bert leans a little too far over the edge, waving his bucket and his dignity in equal measure. The water itself is an adventure. It comes up cold, sometimes clear, and sometimes not. If you're lucky, Today's draw is only slightly cloudy, with nothing larger than a beetle swimming around. On less fortunate days, you get bits of straw, the odd feather, and once the tail end of a frog who made poor life choices, you pretend not to notice. Medieval hydration is all about managing expectations, and occasionally your gag reflex. At the front of the line, a group of children bicker over whose turn it is to lower the bucket. A woman with arms like tree trunks hauls up a full load, pausing only to fish out a twig with the resigned expertise of someone who's seen it all. She pours her prize into her own jug and onto her feet, then shuffles off, leaving a damp trail and a faint air of victory. For you, the challenge is simply making it to the well and back without spilling everything, or, worse, discovering that the handle on your jug is more aspirational than functional. You inch forward, eyeing the progress, and try not to think about how many hands have touched the communal rope. There's always a lingering suspicion that the well is less a fresh spring and more an experimental soup. On holidays, someone swears the water tastes like onions. Nobody asks why. Occasionally calamity strikes. A goat escapes its leash, charges through the line, and in a flurry of panic and feathers, knocks someone's bucket straight into the well. There's a moment of silence, a collective sigh, and then the next person in line shrugs and starts over. In the Middle Ages, there's no use crying over spilled water, or spilled anything really. Once your turn finally arrives, you lower the bucket with the solemnity of a sacred ritual, say a quick prayer to Saint Hydration, and haul up your portion. The effort is real. The rope bites your hands, your back protests, and your jug creaks ominously as it's filled to the brim. You take a quick glance at the contents, mostly water, a few bonus particles, and the possibility of an unscheduled bath if you're not careful. Getting home is its own test. Each step is careful, calculated, and deeply suspenseful. A single misstep on the cobbles or a wayward chicken can undo a morning's labour. More than one medieval citizen has arrived home with nothing but damp shoes and a story to tell. Finally, you make it to your door, arms trembling but victorious. The water is set aside for drinking, cooking, and, on special occasions, maybe even washing. You take a moment to savour the accomplishment. In a world where clean water is a daily gamble, every successful trip to the well is a tiny triumph. So tonight, as you sip your slightly earthy, possibly amphibian-flavoured water, you give silent thanks to your ancestors, your strong back, and the village well. And if you find a feather floating on top, you just scoop it out and carry on. In medieval times, a little extra protein never hurt anyone. Probably. The apothecary offers miracle cures for everything. Most are 90% alcohol, 10% wishful thinking. You buy a small bottle just in case your bread turns on you later. The apothecary's corner is the medieval market's answer to modern healthcare. Google and late-night infomercials rolled into one. The stall itself is a riot of smells, herbs drying on strings, mysterious jars of pickled roots, and little bundles of who knows what promising to cure everything from boils to heartbreak. The apothecary, part wizard, part bartender, and part local therapist, greets you with a knowing smile and eyebrows bushier than your neighbour's goat. Their shelves are lined with colourful vials and suspicious ointments. Some liquids shimmer like pond water on a sunny day. Others are so thick you're pretty sure they're just yesterday's stew repurposed as digestive aid. If you ask what's inside, the apothecary will answer with a sweeping hand and a vague story about ancient recipes and the blessings of Saint somebody or other. The actual ingredients? Nobody really wants to know. You explain your troubles, an aching back, a touch of fever, a rash in places you'd rather not mention. The apothecary listens intently, then suggests a syrup fortified with special herbs. You notice the bottle has a suspiciously high number of floating objects and the colour of week-old pond scum. Still, you trust the process. After all, science is mostly a rumour at this point, and trust the process is all anyone really has. You hand over a few coins and receive your miracle cure. The apothecary encourages you to take it with a strong drink, and if possible, a prayer or two. Most medieval remedies, you realise, are just creative ways of encouraging hydration, preferably with alcohol. The logic is simple. If you're tipsy enough, you won't notice the pain, the fever, or the fact that your cure tastes like fermented moss and regret. Browsing the stall, you see all manner of magical solutions. Powdered unicorn horn, spoiler, it's probably chalk, dragon's blood, definitely beet juice, and elixir of life, most likely some mix of honey, vinegar and wild hope. There are jars labelled for courage, for love, and less encouragingly, for emergencies. One box claims to cure melancholy, insomnia, and the neighbour's noisy rooster, although it mostly seems to be dried lavender and a suggestion to go to bed early. Some remedies have become local legends. There's old Marjorie, who swears by a tea made from nettles and beetles' legs for her arthritis. The baker's wife drinks fermented dandelion wine to keep the spirits at bay, which may explain the singing. Even the priest keeps a secret stash of blessed tonic for spiritual ailments, which is code for Tuesday afternoon. If you look hard enough, you'll find a bottle for every problem, real or imagined, and most people buy at least one just to be safe. Of course, not every cure works as advertised. A dose too strong might leave you seeing angels, or just sleeping for a week. A dose too weak, and you're back in the apothecary's line tomorrow, trading more coins for another shot at health. But that's the gamble. In the Middle Ages, medicine is part luck, part placebo, and entirely an act of faith. You tuck your small bottle into your bag, feeling slightly reassured and slightly swindled. Maybe it will help your next headache. Maybe it will just make you forget you had one. In any case, the apothecary has done their job. They've given you hope, a little flavour for your day, and something to talk about when the bread inevitably fights back. And tonight, if your stomach rebels or your joints protest, you'll remember that bottle, say a quick prayer, and take your dose with a brave face. In the world of medieval remedies, sometimes hope and a little fermented courage are all you need to get by. The cobbler's stall is just a pile of sad leather things. Shoes are all left foot or right foot, but never both. You leave with a new pair and immediately get a blister. It's tradition. Buying shoes in the Middle Ages is an experience equal parts optimism and regret. The cobbler himself is a fixture at the edge of the market, perched on a wobbling stool, surrounded by shoes in every shade of brown and every shape of almost. He looks at your bare, muddy feet and gives you a nod, an unspoken agreement that neither of you expects this to go well. The first challenge is finding a pair. Shoes are a luxury, and if you own any at all, you're already winning at life, even if they don't actually match. Forget about sizes. The medieval cobbler works with only two categories: small and ambitious. He pushes a pile of shoes your way. You dig through them, hoping for something that doesn't have a suspicious hole or an embedded pebble with a vendetta. You finally unearth two shoes that are vaguely similar in shape, if not in colour or intention. You slip them on and instantly regret it. The left one is stiff as old cheese and rubs your heel like it's personally offended by your presence. The right one folds in at the arch, determined to pinch you with every step. Still, these are improvements over your current footwear. Bare skin, a shredded piece of old tunic, and hope. The cobbler watches your struggle, offering sage advice like, "You'll get used to it, and just don't walk too much." He suggests padding the shoes with hay, or, for the truly desperate, a piece of last year's festival banner. Laces? Luxury. Most medieval shoes are just bits of leather tied around your foot with whatever string or leftover pig gut you have lying around. If you have the money, you can spring for upgraded shoes. These might even come with a thin wooden sole, perfect for amplifying every rock and sharp object in the road. Or, for the truly rich, shoes dyed with mysterious plants, which will stain your feet blue or green for the next month. Children, meanwhile, are left to run wild and barefoot, building up calluses so thick they could walk on a bed of nails and barely notice. As for foot care, let's just say expectations are low. There are no pedicures, no soothing soaks, and certainly no soothing peppermint lotion. After a week of trudging through mud, manure, and whatever mystery sludge collects in the village street, Your feet resemble the local root vegetables, gnarled, tough, and sporting the occasional sprout. If you develop a blister, congratulations, you're officially medieval. The cure is to pop it. Wrap your foot in whatever's handy and keep walking. People trade foot care secrets in hushed tones. Soak your feet in warm ale, whispers one neighbour, or smear on goose fat if you can spare it. The best advice, though, is simply to stop complaining. After all, everyone's feet look like they've lost a battle with a local hedgehog population. Once you've made your choice, you hand over your coins and walk away, the sound of new blisters already echoing in your future. Your stride is more of a limp, and every cobblestone is a reminder that comfort is a luxury for another century. But at least your feet are covered, and in the Middle Ages that counts as self-care. So tonight, as you massage your aching toes and examine your new shoes for hidden surprises, remember, style comes and goes, but medieval blisters are forever. Sleep well, foot warrior. Tomorrow's another day, and another walk in someone else's shoes, whether you like it or not. Tempted by a hot meat pie? That's brave. Street food smells amazing, but could be anything from eel to mystery bits. You risk it, and pray to whatever saints handle indigestion. You drift toward the market's food vendors, drawn in by the hypnotic swirl of spices, roasting meat and baked dough wafting through the air. A brief, mouth-watering break from the usual sense of goats and ambition. The street food stall itself is a wonderland for the senses. Baskets of steaming pies and skewers of something fresh glisten in the firelight. On a good day, the pies are flaky, the stew is thick, and the cooks only look mildly suspicious about what exactly went into your lunch. There's no menu. The medieval version of chef's choice means you get whatever they made today, or more accurately, whatever needed using up before it sprouted legs and left on its own. You sidle up to the pie seller, a woman with forearms sturdy enough to knead dough or win an arm wrestling contest, and hand over your coin. In return, she gives you a hot, fragrant parcel that could, in theory, be food or a cleverly disguised medieval prank. Biting into a meat pie in the Middle Ages is a leap of faith. The crust is thick enough to double as a building material, but inside you're greeted by a savoury, peppery filling that hints at something. You try to identify the meat, but your palate is met with the subtle notes of definitely not chicken, possibly squirrel, and could be hope. You eat anyway, because it's hot, you're hungry, and you've learned to stop asking questions when food is involved. Next door, a man sells stews bubbling away in cast-iron cauldrons. The ingredients change depending on the day, the weather, and the latest livestock-related accident in town. Beans, onions, and hearty root vegetables are standard, but you occasionally find something chewy, which could be a delicacy, or just last week's catch. The vendor cheerfully ladles the stew into a communal bowl, wipes the rim on his sleeve, and assures you it's just the thing for what ails you. You hope what ails you isn't about to become what ails you more. For the adventurous, or truly desperate, there's grilled fish on a stick, seasoned mostly by the smoke and a dash of luck. You pay, close your eyes, and chomp down, mentally running through every saint you know with a reputation for miracles. At least it's protein, probably. The real show, though, is the crowd. Street food is a social event. Children dart in to steal bites when the vendor's back is turned. Teenagers dare each other to try the mystery sausage, and old-timers swap stories about the best pies from festivals past, none of which somehow are ever available today. It's a festival of risk and reward, all played out in the open air and the sound of someone inevitably burping nearby. Of course, there's a reason medieval saints are invoked at every meal. Digestion is a gamble. 1 in 3 pies will send you home happy and full. The other 2 will have you reconsidering all your life choices, possibly while sprinting to the nearest bush. Remedies for pie stomach are sold nearby, usually a mix of herbs, honey, and a firm recommendation to lie down and think about your decisions. When you finish, you wipe your hands on your tunic, congratulate yourself for surviving another round of medieval culinary roulette, and watch as the next brave soul steps up for their turn. In a world where dinner could bite back, every street meal is both a celebration and a calculated risk. But hey, if you're lucky, tonight's mystery meat will be just that, a mystery. And in the Middle Ages, mystery is sometimes the tastiest ingredient of all. If you have any money left, you might visit the bathhouse. It's steamy, chaotic, and not as clean as the name suggests. You leave feeling slightly cleaner and a lot more aware of local scandals. The bathhouse looms on the edge of the marketplace, a squat building crowned with a rickety chimney, puffing out clouds of steam and the faint, unmistakable aroma of communal anxiety. The sign outside is a water-stained plank with a faded drawing that might be a bath or might be a cow in distress. Either way, it promises warmth, soap, if you're lucky, and the chance to wash off at least one layer of the medieval marketplace. Inside, it's a lively scene. Voices echo off the stone walls, steam billows in thick, mysterious clouds, and towels are optional, usually damp and often communal. The bathing pools are packed, some hot, some cold, and all slightly questionable. You hand your coin to the bathkeeper, who gives you a knowing look, one that says, "Good luck," more than "welcome." Changing rooms are non-existent. Instead, everyone ducks behind a wooden partition, abandons any sense of personal space, and hops awkwardly toward the nearest tub. You eye the water with a mixture of hope and skepticism. The surface glistens, possibly from soap, possibly from last week's stew, and as you slide in, you try not to think about how many feet have been here before you. You comfort yourself with the fact that hot water, no matter how faintly herbal, is a rare treat. The bathhouse is more than a place to get clean. It's the local news centre, rumour mill and social club. Everyone talks, loudly and without pause. Old women exchange gossip as if trading rare coins. Farmers compare turnip yields. Merchants whisper about who's cheating at market weights and who was seen sneaking out after curfew. Even the bathkeeper gets involved, contributing stories, jokes, and the occasional comment about the mayor's suspicious rash. Privacy doesn't exist. Every cough, every splash, every confession echoes across the room. You try to focus on scrubbing away the day's mud and regret, but the conversation drifts your way. Someone asks about your shopping haul, then proceeds to tell you what you overpaid for, what you should have bought, and what your new shoes say about your personality. Apparently desperate but resilient. There's a hierarchy to the bathhouse too. The wealthy get their own smaller tubs in the back, close to the hearth, where the water is actually hot and the towels smell less like wet dog. The rest of the crowd jostles for space in the main pool, occasionally fighting for a spot under the bucket of fresh water dumped by a cheerful, slightly sadistic attendant. For the especially unlucky, there's always the cold plunge, allegedly good for the spirits, but mostly an opportunity to scream in public and call it self-improvement. If you're looking for soap, you'd better bring your own, or hope to be adopted by one of the old bathhouse regulars, who might share a precious scrap in exchange for a good story or a few coins. Otherwise, the best you can hope for is a brisk rub-down with a rough cloth, and the deeply held conviction that you're probably cleaner than you were an hour ago. By the time you leave, you're flushed, wrinkled, and caught up on every juicy rumour from the past week. Your skin tingles, your muscles ache less, and your sense of dignity is, well, about average for the Middle Ages. You dry off, pull on your slightly damp clothes, and step back into the world, cleaner in body, if not in reputation. And as you walk away, you realise the bathhouse is less about hygiene and more about connection. A rare moment of shared warmth in a chilly, muddy world. You'll sleep easier tonight, knowing you've washed off just enough of the day to face tomorrow's adventures, and maybe, if you're lucky, you'll dream of a future where baths are private, towels are fluffy, and gossip is just a thing you read in books. The market is also a stage. Performers juggle, jesters mock, and at least one local is already 3 ales deep. You stop to watch, realising this is the closest you'll get to Netflix. Amid the mud and commerce, the medieval market comes alive with all manner of low-budget spectacle. Over by the baker's stall, A juggler attempts to keep 3 apples and 1 slightly panicked frog in the air, while a crowd of children places bets on which will hit the ground first. His act is less about precision and more about comic timing, especially when the frog makes a break for it, causing mild chaos and wild applause. A few stalls down, the village jester holds court, bright cap jingling, a wide grin painted permanently on his face. He's a master of the roast, armed with more puns than sense. He aims his jokes at everyone, but especially at the local authorities, who pretend not to be listening while secretly checking to see if their shoes are the punchline. For a brief moment, everyone forgets about taxes, mud and missing poultry and just laughs, even if it's at their own expense. Music floats above the crowd, someone with a battered lute, playing what sounds like the same 4 notes on loop, and a fiddler who's determined to play louder than the market goats. The songs are familiar, tales of lost love, noble deeds, and a surprisingly detailed ballad about cheese theft that everyone claims to know. Villagers join in, off-key but enthusiastic, turning the market into a slightly out-of-tune concert hall. Of course, not all performers are professionals. There's always a wild card, the local drunk, a fixture of market day. He spins tales of dragons, pirates, and heroic chickens, often simultaneously. He dances when nobody's playing, sings when nobody's listening, and occasionally attempts a backflip that defies both physics and common sense. Children gather around, cheering him on, while adults place gentle bets on whether he'll land on his feet or face. Street magicians work the fringes, turning bits of string into gold, making coins disappear, often from someone's actual pocket, and delighting onlookers with sleight of hand. The grand finale is always the same. A child volunteers, and with a flourish, the magician produces a perfectly ordinary turnip from behind their ear. Everyone applauds. In a world where turnips are the baseline of life, this is as close to alchemy as most people will ever get. The market entertainment isn't just distraction, it's survival. In a world where hard work and bad weather are a package deal, everyone needs a laugh. These moments of shared silliness knit the community together. The baker cheers for the juggler, the blacksmith joins the singing, and even the grumpy fishmonger cracks a smile when the jester impersonates his legendary 3-day-old herring face. Sometimes a troupe of travelling performers sweeps through town, raising the stakes with fire-eating acrobatics and tales of far-off places where people supposedly eat food that isn't beige. Children swarm to watch, eyes wide, and for a few copper coins or a slice of stale bread. The visitors will tell fortunes or teach you to walk on your hands. Results not guaranteed. By the end of the day, you're sunburnt, pockets lighter, and cheeks sore from smiling. The performers pack up, the crowd drifts home, and even the drunk guy eventually runs out of stories and falls gently asleep under a table. As you leave, the faint echo of laughter and off-key singing follows you, a reminder that in the Middle Ages, a little bit of entertainment goes a long way. Tonight, as you close your eyes, the scenes replay in your mind: juggled apples, clever jokes, and songs sung badly but bravely. It's not Netflix, but it's enough, and sometimes that's all you need to drift peacefully into sleep. If you're feeling unwell, the remedies are creative: leeches, mystery ointments, or maybe a priest with strong opinions. You walk away slightly concerned, and no healthier. In the medieval market, shopping for remedies is the ultimate gamble. You wander past the apothecary and healer stalls, each promising miraculous cures and hope in a bottle, or occasionally a sack. The tables are a jumble of little clay pots, vials filled with liquids of highly suspicious colour, bundles of dried plants, and looming ominously, jars full of wiggling leeches. The healer, a woman with more wrinkles than teeth and eyes that sparkle with equal parts wisdom and mischief, greets you warmly. "What ails you?" she asks, already reaching for something that smells like vinegar and despair. You hesitate. Is it the headache from yesterday's meat pie? The mysterious rash from the fish stall? Or maybe just a deep, unshakable feeling that life in the Middle Ages is harder than it strictly needs to be? Before you can answer, she's got options. For headaches, there's a cold compress of cabbage leaves or a special brew made from willow bark, garlic, and whatever she found in her garden that morning. For rashes, she recommends a paste of honey, mud, and, for good luck, a prayer to St. Ichlis. You try to look hopeful as she applies the mixture, but you're pretty sure the real cure is simply not thinking about it too much. If you're truly desperate, there are always leeches. The healer swears by them, as does her assistant, a thin, nervous-looking man whose main qualification seems to be an immunity to squeamishness. Leeches draw out the bad blood, she says, with the conviction of someone who's never lost an argument. You glance at the jar, see the leeches squirming hopefully, and suddenly reconsider just how bad your headache really is. Some stalls sell ointments and potions that promise instant relief. The ointments are thick, greasy, and oddly green, while the potions are equal parts herbal and wishful thinking. You're encouraged to rub the ointment on anything that hurts, or, if the pain persists, on something that doesn't, just to keep your mind off it. Potions are chugged, sipped, or applied to your forehead, depending on which neighbour you ask. If nothing else, they'll give you something to talk about during your next trip to the bathhouse. Of course, not everyone trusts the healers and apothecaries. Some swear by the local priest who offers prayers, advice, and, in rare cases, a stern lecture about your life choices. If all else fails, you can always blame your illness on bad humours, evil spirits, or an unlucky day. The priest may prescribe holy water, an extra-long sermon, or, if he's feeling particularly inspired, a pilgrimage to the next village, which is at least a change of scenery if not a genuine cure. You notice other shoppers comparing cures, swapping stories about whose rash went away first, whose potion actually tasted like fruit, and who ended up with more leech than relief. Remedies are social currency, and everyone has an opinion. If you're clever, you can collect enough advice to make your own remedy. 3 herbs, a boiled egg, and a lot of optimism. You leave the market clutching a little jar of something brown, a bundle of pungent herbs, and strict instructions not to get wet, go near livestock, or, under any circumstances, eat another meat pie this week. The healer wishes you luck, the priest wishes you blessings, and you wish you'd just stayed in bed. Still, there's hope. Medieval life is short, but stories of miraculous recoveries are long. Maybe this ointment will work, maybe it won't, but at least you've done your best. You'll sleep tonight with a whiff of herbs and the quiet knowledge that, leeches or not, you're surviving. And in the Middle Ages, that's practically a miracle. As the sun goes down, the market changes. Shadows lengthen, new vendors appear, and deals get shadier. You realise you should leave, but not before buying a pie you instantly regret. The day market is all bustle and noise, but the night market is different. A world of flickering lanterns, whispered bargains, and the subtle sense that everyone's up to something. Stalls you never noticed before suddenly appear, run by strangers with faces hidden by hoods or scarves. Their wares are displayed under the soft glow of tallow candles, turning even the most ordinary turnip into a shadowy mystery. You step carefully, feeling your way between puddles and hay bales. The crowds have thinned, but the mood is lively in a more conspiratorial way. Regular vendors are packing up, haggling over the last scraps, while night merchants lay out their own curious inventory. Here, a man sells genuine relics, splinters from a saint's walking stick, a feather from a holy chicken, and a ring that definitely once belonged to someone very important, or maybe just very forgetful. Nobody seems to be buying, but everyone is looking, glancing over shoulders as if expecting the night watch to appear at any moment. Other vendors offer forbidden delights, spiced mead ladled from a dented kettle, dried herbs for medicinal use only, and candied nuts sticky enough to glue your teeth together until morning. A shadowy woman gestures you over to see her potions, tiny vials that promise luck, love, and a stomach of iron. "Drink this before eating anything from that pie stall," she whispers. a twinkle in her eye. You consider it, then decide you'd rather risk the pie. The infamous pie stall is the heart of the night market, a beacon for the hungry and the reckless. Its owner, a stout fellow with a crooked hat and a mysterious past, sells pies of every shape and size. Each one is steaming, golden, and so tempting you ignore the warning bells in your head. You order one, trade a coin, and bite in, discovering in an instant that the filling is equal parts turnip, regret, and an unidentifiable spice that could double as a cleaning agent. Around you, deals happen in low voices and rapid handshakes. Someone barters a rabbit pelt for a bundle of wax, a young couple trades a song for a slab of smoked meat, and an old woman swaps a riddle for a slice of cheese. The night market isn't just a place for goods, it's a theatre for secrets, gossip, and the occasional low-stakes crime. If you look closely, you might see someone selling moonlight in a jar, or a cat that changes colour in the right lantern light. You decide not to investigate further. Of course, there's always an element of risk. Shadows linger. The pickpockets get bolder after dark, darting between stalls and vanishing if you so much as glance their way. The local watch strolls by, lanterns bobbing, pretending not to notice as long as nobody's fighting, shouting, or running naked through the cabbage patch. Their main job is to keep the peace and to grab a pie before the stall closes. You finish your dubious pie, savouring the adventure as much as the taste. With your last copper in your pocket and a few new stories in your head, you decide it's time to go. You step out of the lamplight and back into the shadows, leaving behind the laughter, the rumours, and the lingering scent of questionable spices. The night market is strange, secretive, and a little magical. You survived, if not the pie, at least the experience. As you walk home, the market fades behind you, replaced by the quiet of the night and the promise that tomorrow the world will look less mysterious and your stomach, hopefully, will feel less adventurous. You tally your purchases: 2 turnips, a stale loaf, 1 blister, and a chicken you definitely didn't pay for. You leave poorer, grubbier, and somehow satisfied. You survived medieval shopping. As the market winds down and the sun dips behind the thatched rooftops, you look at your meagre haul with a strange sense of accomplishment. Sure, you started the day with dreams of fresh bread, ripe fruit, and maybe, just maybe, a slice of real cheese. Now, as you gather your battered basket and brush mud from your hem, you're coming to terms with the true realities of medieval shopping. You get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. At least not unless you want to start a feud. You pause, shifting your basket from one sore arm to the other, and take stock. There are the obligatory turnips, your new best friends and dinner for the next 3 nights. Next to them, the infamous loaf, so hard you could use it to patch your leaky roof or defend yourself from highwaymen. The chicken, which somehow became your responsibility mid-afternoon, gives you a sideways look, as if judging your bargaining skills. You try not to meet its gaze. You're not sure if you rescued it, or if it cleverly stowed away, biding its time until you reach home. Alongside your produce and accidental livestock, there's a collection of other treasures and trials, a bundle of wilted herbs, a wedge of cheese with more personality than your local squire, and a handful of eggs that will, if fortune smiles, survive the journey back to your hovel. You've acquired a small pouch of something labelled remedy, which you may use for your next mysterious stomach ailment, or as barter for a favour with the village healer. At the very bottom, crushed by the weight of your ambitions, are the remains of a street pie, 1 bite missing, the rest left as a reminder that gambling on dinner is not always a winning bet. You mentally add up what you've spent: a few copper coins, a string of bartered onions, half a promise to help the blacksmith fix his fence, and the lingering hope that nobody remembers you still owe for last month's cabbage. Your feet throb, your shoulders ache, and you're covered in more layers of dirt than when you left home, but none of it matters as you follow the tired crowd back down the winding lane. Every shopper trudges home with their own unique assortment of treasures and disappointments. Some cradle-prize sausages or a length of cloth for new shirts, Others have little more than a smile and a story about outsmarting the fishmonger. No one really believes them. There's laughter, quiet grumbling, and the ever-present sound of chickens, which seem to multiply as the day ends. If you listen closely, you can hear the farmers already planning next week's market strategy, plotting revenge against the baker, or practicing new ways to avoid the pickpockets. Despite the chaos, there's a camaraderie in this weary procession. You survived the haggling, the squabbling, and the endless mud. You braved the pickpockets, dodged questionable pies, and, most impressively, managed not to accidentally start a feud that will last until your grandchildren's time. That's worth celebrating, even if your celebration is just a quiet sigh of relief. As you round the final corner, your humble cottage in sight, you glance at your battered basket and the chicken that is now inexplicably part of the family. Tonight's meal may be plain, but it's honest, and every bite is flavoured by the struggle that brought it home. You step inside, set your treasures down, and stretch your sore muscles. Tomorrow you'll mend your blisters and maybe your pride, but tonight you'll eat, you'll rest, and you'll dream of a market where the bread is soft, the cheese is mild, and the chickens all come with receipts. You survived medieval shopping. That's more than enough for one day. Back at home, your family inspects your haul. There is judgment. There is disappointment. There is also dinner, if you can convince the chicken to stay put. You vow to never go shopping again, at least until next week. The journey from market to home felt endless, weighed down by your basket, a trail of questionable mud, and the suspiciously quiet chicken under your arm. Now, as you cross the threshold, the family emerges, eyes wide with a combination of hope, skepticism, and the kind of silent disapproval perfected by medieval grandmothers. First comes the inventory process. Your eldest holds up the bread loaf and knocks it on the table, producing a noise that rattles every spoon in the house. "It'll do," they pronounce, which is both a compliment and a warning to chew carefully. Your youngest pokes at the wilted greens and turnips, giving them a look usually reserved for cold bath water. Even the family dog sniffs the cheese, recoils, and decides to patrol the chicken instead, just in case. You set the eggs down with an air of triumph, only to see one has cracked, leaking a slow, sticky trail across the table. Your partner eyes the purchase with a mixture of pity and admiration. You, who once had dreams of fresh apples, now champion of the humble turnip. The herbs, slightly limp but still fragrant, are met with a cheer. Tonight's stew will at least pretend to have flavour. Then comes the family tribunal. Each item is passed around, poked, sniffed and commented on, with the sharp wit of people who have spent a lifetime stretching a turnip into a meal for six. The verdicts range from "could be worse" to, well, at least it's not eels. The chicken, now perched atop a kitchen stool, clucks indignantly as if to remind everyone it is not, in fact, a side dish. For now. You attempt to tell the story of your day, the pickpockets, the pie gamble, the near barter for a single peppercorn. The children listen wide-eyed, the adults chuckle, and your mother-in-law tuts and reminds you that back in her day the cheese came with even more personality. You vow, again, as you do every week, that next time you'll be tougher, thriftier, and less susceptible to impulse chicken acquisitions. Dinner, when it finally appears, is a modest affair. Stew, some dubious bread, and the eggs that survived. The conversation drifts from what you bought to what you wish you could have bought. Garlic, honey, maybe a soft cheese or a single plump pear. These are fantasies, but they're good ones, told between mouthfuls of turnip and laughter at your chicken-chasing misadventures. As the candle burns lower, you feel a kind of comfort settle over you. You may not have returned with a feast, but you've kept everyone fed, entertained, and slightly amused by the world's most defiant poultry. The complaints are more ritual than real. Deep down, everyone knows it takes courage and flexible expectations to come back from market day with your purse, your dignity, and your sense of humour mostly intact. Soon, it's time for bed. The chicken finds its new spot beside the hearth. Your blistered feet finally get a rest, and the family drifts to sleep, dreaming of next week's possibilities. softer bread, riper apples, and maybe, just maybe, a market miracle. As you close your eyes, you vow, never again. Or at least, not until supplies run low, tempers grow short, and the distant sound of the market bells calls you out for another round. In the medieval world, the cycle never really ends, but for tonight you've earned your rest and maybe even a little respect. Good night, weary shopper. You've faced judgment, disappointment, and dinner. Once again, you've made it home. You follow your nose to the candle stall, which smells faintly of hope and overwhelmingly of sheep. The candle maker is a woman with soot-stained hands and a sales pitch that's twice as bright as her wares. Her candles come in all shapes: lumpy, lopsided, and artisan, which means slightly less lumpy. You pick one up and immediately leave a greasy fingerprint on the outside. Turns out tallow is not just for candles, it's also for hands, hair, and the occasional emergency snack. You consider splurging on a beeswax candle. Luxury. But the price makes you see stars, so you settle for 2 stubby tallow lumps and pray they burn longer than your patience. The candle seller's stall is wedged between the fishmonger and the soap maker, which means she has an automatic market for anyone desperate to mask the aroma of market day. Her table is cluttered with squat pillars, twisted tapers, and more than a few candles that look like they melted before they even made it out of the mould. She gestures grandly to her selection. Best light in the Shire. Perfect for prayers, dinners, or chasing out the night spirits. She neglects to mention that best is a relative term, and that each candle will fight you every step of the way, dripping, sputtering, and occasionally going out just when you need it most. You pick up a stubby candle, squint at its uneven base, and give it a cautious sniff. It smells like animal fat and ambition, with undertones of whatever the sheep were eating that season. You ask if there's anything longer lasting. The candle maker leans in conspiratorially and offers you a beeswax candle. Golden, almost shining in the sun, and as far from tallow as a feast is from famine. She names the price, and you mentally calculate how many turnips you'd have to go without to light your cottage for a single night. You sigh and set it down, opting for the 2-for-1 special. 2 squat tallow lumps and a small bonus candle for emergencies, which looks suspiciously like a failed experiment. In the Middle Ages, light is never taken for granted. The sun sets early and rises late, and between the two, darkness prowls outside every window and under every eave. Candlelight is less about romance and more about not stepping on a chicken or into a chamber pot after dusk. Every family hoards their stubs and scraps, melting down whatever's left at the end of each week to form the world's saddest Franken candle. A lopsided tower of half-melted memories. The actual burning process is an adventure. Tallow candles sputter and spit, their flames more orange than yellow, sending up curls of smoke that stick to your rafters and eventually your lungs. The wicks are unpredictable, sometimes too short, sometimes long enough to set the cat on fire if you're not careful. The room fills with a scent of scorched fat and a thin, greasy haze that lingers for days. On windy nights, the candles stutter and die, leaving you cursing, tripping, and promising to never cheap out on beeswax again. Still, everyone needs candles. The priest for his evening prayers, the baker for early morning kneading, the kids for bedtime stories that look a lot more dramatic when told by flickering shadows. The candle maker knows this and throws in sales pitches with every purchase. 1 for luck, 1 for love, 1 to keep the neighbours from stealing your chickens. You nod, unsure if the candles have magical properties, or if she's just really good at marketing. When you finally make your purchase, 2 lumpy tallow candles and 1 that looks more like a doorstop, you carry them home with pride. They'll light your evening stew, cast just enough glow for a game of dice, and if you're lucky, burn long enough to get you to bed without incident. The next morning you'll sweep up the puddle of cooled wax and start the process again, quietly plotting how to afford just 1 beeswax candle before winter. Because in the medieval world, true luxury isn't gold or silk, it's the steady, sweet glow of a candle that doesn't make you cough. And until that day comes, you and your lumpy tallow stubs will face the night together, one greasy flickering flame at a time. Next to the blacksmith you spot the potter's stall, an obstacle course of clay bowls, jugs and mugs stacked with the casual confidence of a man who's never seen a strong wind. You need a new mug because last week's collapsed in a tragic hot pottage incident. The potter gestures at his collection. Finest wares in town, he claims, as a plate with 3 cracks wobbles on the edge of the table. Every item comes with a story and a price just high enough to make you hesitate. You choose a jug with a handle almost attached, and the potter throws in a tiny cup for luck, or maybe just to keep you from complaining. If you need glue, that's another stall and another story. The potter's territory is a landscape of risk and reward. Everything on the table looks like it survived a minor earthquake, and the air hums with the constant threat of a disaster that would leave you ankle-deep in shards. The stall holder himself is dusted in a layer of clay and pride. He stands behind his work like a medieval magician, eager to convince you that character is just another word for cracked but still mostly functional. Every piece is a survivor, and he'll tell you so, launching into tales of that plate which was used at last year's festival, or the lucky mug that survived 3 dropped hams and a drunken uncle. Browsing is an exercise in careful optimism. You pick up a bowl and give it a tap. It rings, sort of, but it also rattles, which might be a feature or a bug. You look at the painted decorations, swirling patterns, flowers, and the occasional attempt at a rooster that mostly looks like an abstract turnip. The colours are cheerful, the glazes patchy, and the insides always just a little rough to the touch. Handmade, the potter declares, as if that explains the occasional embedded fingerprint or the fact that one side of your new plate is distinctly higher than the other. Needless to say, nothing here matches. The idea of a set is a fever dream. Instead, your future kitchen will look like the leftovers from an artistic brawl. Each cup, bowl and jug a slightly different colour and shape. But that's half the charm. In the Middle Ages, uniformity is for the monastery, not the marketplace. You spot a jug with a personality, a lean to the left, a faint green streak, and a handle that's attached in spirit, if not in structural integrity. Special price for you, the potter says, as if reading your hesitation. He throws in a miniature cup, for luck, which may also be a clever way to clear space on his teetering table. He warns you to avoid hot wine, boiling water, or sudden movements, which is medieval code for please don't sue me if this falls apart. You ask about repairs. The potter grins and nods toward a neighbouring stall, the glue merchant who sells tiny pots of adhesive made from fish bones, old cheese, or whatever was left in the cauldron at the end of the week. Glue is both miracle and mystery, able to hold together a mug, temporarily, or add a faint aroma of herring to your morning ale. Most villagers are part-time pot menders, with each crack in their crockery telling a story of dinner-table mishaps, overexcited children, and the occasional pet goat. The real secret? Everyone expects a little breakage. If your jug makes it through the week, you're ahead. If not, there's always next market day. Some people say it's good luck to drink from a chipped cup. Others swear by plates with history. Just don't eat from the side with a crack. In medieval homes, a pot's imperfections aren't just forgiven. They're celebrated, patched with glue and a sense of community, and sometimes painted over with a fresh swirl of colour. You leave the potter's stall cradling your new jug and lucky cup, well aware you'll be back before long. Maybe for more glue, maybe for another mug, or maybe just for the latest story about the time the potter's cat broke half his stock. Either way, in a world where everything's fragile, you carry your wonky wares home with pride. At least you tell yourself, if it breaks, it's just a chance to go shopping again. In the Middle Ages, that's about as close as you get to a warranty. There's a tiny table near the edge of the market where a hopeful entrepreneur sells fragrance. Bottles of murky liquid, bundles of dried flowers, and mysterious sachets promising to banish unpleasant odours. Good luck. The vendor, nose held high and eyes watering, insists their perfume is the latest from the city, but you suspect it's just boiled rosemary and the tears of someone who spent too long near the cheese stall. Shoppers dab wrists, sniff, and pretend it's better than mud and mutton. You buy a sachet out of pity, hang it around your neck, and hope it distracts from the 3-day fish aroma clinging to your cloak. The perfume stall is a study in optimism. Arranged with as much elegance as a wobbly table can muster, its wares shimmer in the sunlight. Glass vials filled with liquids in every shade from gold to dubious green. Behind the table, the vendor radiates a mix of pride and sinus fatigue, offering samples to anyone willing to risk a new scent over the familiar funk of livestock and hard labour. Every so often, a hopeful shopper uncorks a bottle and waves it gingerly under their nose, only to recoil with a polite cough and a forced smile. How exotic, someone says, eyes watering, and the vendor beams, undeterred by the mounting casualties. The ingredients list is flexible. Some days it's rosemary, thyme, lavender, if the harvest was kind, or whatever was left unsold at the herbalist's stall. A true luxury scent might include a drop of precious rosewater or a shaving of imported sandalwood, but more often than not it's just forest medley with a hint of regret. The city's elite might wear imported perfumes, but here in the village, perfume is more defensive measure than fashion statement. The goal isn't to smell good, it's to smell less bad than everyone else. Potpourri is the big seller. Little linen sachets stuffed with dried petals, orange peel, and a variety of aromatic weeds tied with bits of string. The vendor swears they'll ward off evil spirits, nasty humours, and, most importantly, barnyard stench. Some people slip sachets into their boots, others hang them from their belts, and a few desperate souls tuck one under their hats, creating a strange cloud of floral confusion wherever they walk. Grandmothers hoard them in cupboards, newlyweds exchange them as an act of hope and solidarity. These sachets never quite win the battle, but everyone agrees it's better than nothing. Then there are the so-called perfumes. The vendor will tell you a single drop behind each ear will guarantee admiration and possibly marriage proposals. In reality, it's just as likely to attract bees, cats, or an unfortunate amount of local attention. A few brave shoppers splash some on, only to spend the rest of market day swatting flies and explaining to strangers that no, they're not fermenting, just embracing city style. If you manage to find a scent that doesn't burn your skin or cause sneezing fits, you guard it fiercely. One whiff of something vaguely pleasant can boost your social standing, at least until you return home and have to explain the expense. Fragrance in the Middle Ages is not a private affair. There's always a crowd of curious onlookers, offering opinions. Smells like spring. Reminds me of my cousin's barn. Is that turnip? If you ask for a recommendation, the vendor sizes you up and suggests something bold and earthy. Market code for, I need to get rid of this batch. You nod, buy a sachet, more out of social obligation than hope, and the vendor slips in a complimentary sample of Midnight Meadow or Cheese Cellar Dreams for good measure. Back at home, your family inspects your new acquisition with interest and caution. Someone suggests using it as a room freshener, another votes for hanging it in the outhouse. You try to defend your purchase, insisting that next week you'll invest in the real city perfume. After all, there's always hope. As you settle in for the evening, you notice the faint scent of wilted lavender and something unidentifiable rising from your collar. It's not quite paradise, but at least it's progress. In a world where bathing is rare and cheese is alive, you take your victories where you can. The sachet might not transform you into a courtier, but for a few brief hours you smell more like a distant dream than yesterday's stew. And in medieval shopping, that counts as high fashion. A corner of the market is given over to childhood, or at least what passes for it. There's a boy selling spinning tops whittled from leftover wood, a girl trading rag dolls made from old tunic scraps, and a crafty old man hawking a deck of cards that are just squares of bark with animals drawn on them. Kids swarm around, bartering sticks for pebbles, and staging epic marbles tournaments in the mud. You pause to buy a wooden rattle for your nephew, but end up joining a spirited debate over whose top spins longest. For one moment you forget about pickpockets and bread blisters, until a ball of mud hits you in the face. Medieval fun achieved. The kid zone of the market isn't a playground. There's no swing set, no seesaw, and the only thing soft to land on is a patch of grass, assuming the goats haven't beaten you there. But for a few precious yards, the rules of medieval life are bent in favour of play. The laughter here is genuine, the stakes are low, and if you squint past the mud and mystery stains, there's a spark of pure joy that somehow survives the rest of market day's hard bargains. Toys are all homemade, carved from whatever was left after the firewood and tool handles were spoken for. Wooden animals parade across makeshift stalls, some with 3 legs, others with comically large ears. Each one is a little crooked, a little chipped, but fiercely beloved. One girl waves a doll so patched and battered you suspect it has seen more winters than most of the shoppers. She claims it's magical, capable of protecting its owner from nightmares, stray dogs and bad stew. The other kids believe her. Frankly, so do you. Spinning tops are the undisputed kings of the kid zone. Carved from wood scraps, balanced on rough nails and decorated with bits of dye or soot, these little marvels inspire fierce competition. Children crouch in tight circles, winding up for the next round, while a chorus of adults gathers to place bets. My money's on the blue one. No, the red. No, that's definitely a walnut shell on a stick. Spinning records are set, disputed, and then completely forgotten as soon as a chicken struts through the arena and ends the match in a squawk of feathers and outrage. Ragdolls stuffed with wool or, on lean years, whatever could be scavenged from the sewing pile are prized possessions. Each one is unique, dressed in fragments of old shirts or coloured ribbons saved from last year's festival. Children swap outfits, share stories, and stage elaborate puppet plays for the handful of adults patient enough to watch. The old man with the bark cards is their audience of one, always ready with a new animal drawing. Is that a lion? It's a hedgehog with ambition. Games are everywhere and nowhere at once. Marbles played with rounded river stones, tag on the green, hide and seek among the hay bales, and, for the especially daring, duck the goose, which involves running as fast as possible while being chased by the market's most notorious bird. Losers wear their bruises with pride. Winners get first pick of the next round of spinning tops, or, if fortune smiles, a lump of honeycomb pressed into their hands by a sympathetic parent. Trading is as fierce as any adult negotiation, with sticks, pretty pebbles, and bits of coloured glass changing hands at dizzying speed. A particularly coveted treasure, a button smooth and blue, passes from one child to another in a series of trades so complicated you'd need a royal accountant to keep track. By sunset, no one remembers who started with the button, but everyone agrees it was the most exciting thing to happen all week. For a brief time you're swept into the world of mud pies, shouted dares, and wild imagination. You buy your nephew a wooden rattle, get caught up in a game of catch the chicken. You lose, the chicken wins, and laugh harder than you have all day. When the mud ball finally hits your face, you wipe it off with a grin. Market day is hard, but here at least childhood still has a fighting chance. And in the medieval kid zone, that's the greatest victory of all. If you're one of the rare folk who can read and write, the scribe's stall is your holy grail. Quills made from goose feathers, ink pots full of dubious black liquid, and paper so expensive you consider carving your shopping list into the bread. The scribe, eyes squinting behind round spectacles, offers you a choice. One small sheet, or a slightly larger sheet with mysterious stains. Adds character, he assures you. You haggle for a bottle of ink and get a free lesson in calligraphy, meaning don't spill it on your clothes. You vow to write a letter just as soon as you can afford the postage. The scribe's stall sits slightly apart from the market's main commotion, perhaps out of necessity. Paper, parchment, and ink aren't just rare. They're invitations for disaster in a world where mud, wind, and poultry roam free. You eye the supplies on display with reverence, a stack of rough, yellowish sheets is kept under a cloth, guarded from wandering hands and airborne chicken droppings. Each sheet is treated like a minor miracle. Touching them, you realise why. This stuff is worth more than cheese, and twice as likely to go mouldy in a rainstorm. Quills come in all sizes, most of them still faintly resembling their former owners. The fanciest are swan or goose, trimmed with a shaky hand, while the more affordable ones are local poultry, which based on the feather's smell may have been sourced from this morning's escapee at the chicken stall. You test a quill's tip against your thumb, pretending you know what you're doing. The scribe nods approvingly, probably because he knows you'll be back next week for another one after you inevitably snap this one in half, mid-sentence. Then there's the ink, a black, suspiciously glossy substance doled out in tiny pots with cork stoppers. The scribe describes it as top quality, mixed with imported gum arabic and the best soot from my own chimney. You're fairly certain it's just burnt stuff and wishful thinking. Still, you pay up, knowing full well that any attempt to make your own will end in disaster, stained tunics, and family legends about the time Uncle Will turned the cat blue. Paper is the star, but parchment is the showstopper. If you're feeling flush, you can upgrade to a scrap of sheepskin, stretched thin and smooth enough to write on, assuming you have the nerve to risk ruining it with your handwriting. The scribe senses your hesitation and, seeing a chance for profit, throws in a few odds and ends. A cracked wax seal, a bonus quill, and a helpful lecture on proper posture while penning your magnum opus. Sit up straight, keep your elbows off the bread, and don't let your candle catch fire to the margins. If you can't afford real paper, the scribe will sometimes offer offcuts, scraps, corners, and irregular sheets that would barely pass for bookmarks. These are prized by aspiring poets, secret note passers, and anyone hoping to record village gossip without splurging half their salary. There's also a rumour that the local bailiff buys the oddest-shaped pieces to draft his official proclamations, which may explain the recent village edict written sideways on a triangle. You take your tiny stash home in a fold of cloth, holding it like treasure. Writing, you realise, isn't just for letters to distant relatives or scribbled love notes, though both will cost you dearly in ink and nerves. Here, it's for debts, deals, recipes, and, if you're bold, secret messages. You make a solemn vow to use every drop of ink wisely, but inevitably, the first mark you make is a giant accidental blot right in the middle of your dear friend. And about that postage, well, in the Middle Ages, sending a letter means finding someone trustworthy, preferably not already 3 ales deep, and convincing them to carry your carefully folded sheet over rivers, roads, and wild geese. The odds your letter actually arrives, slim to none. But the act of writing, the scratch of quill on precious paper, is a small miracle in itself. So you tuck your new ink and paper away, dreaming of stories, secrets, and maybe the world's slowest pen pal. In a land where most people sign with an X and call it a day, you're officially the village intellectual, at least until someone spills ale on your masterpiece. As the sun dips lower and the market begins to empty, the bench slowly clears. The last stragglers are retrieved, some willingly, some carried off under protest, and one, suspiciously silent, who's trying to smuggle out a stray kitten. The old man finally gets a moment to himself, only to spot a small boy with a basket on his head, wandering back into the square. You glance at your own basket, still no sign of your chicken being claimed by anyone else, and count yourself lucky. In a world where people and livestock have a habit of wandering off, simply leaving the market with the same family members and animals you arrived with is a victory. Next week you promise yourself you'll keep a closer eye on everyone. But deep down, you know the old man will still be there, bench at the ready, calling names into the wind, a beacon of hope in a sea of market day chaos. And as you walk away, you can't help but feel a little grateful for the lost child collection point. After all, in the great medieval marketplace of life, we're all just waiting for someone to come find us and maybe trade a turnip for directions home.